Boker Tov, everybody. We learned the Siddur, how to daven to God. So you should help answer our tefillah. I believe this is class 100, 154. I don't know where we're up to exactly, but okay, we'll finish up Willem al we spoke about last week, Shmuel Hakata, and why he's the one who has to compose it, and Hayden. We spoke, of course, last week on Asar B'Tevet also, but we'll get into some of the, just quickly, some of the wording of the tefillah, which we didn't do yet, and at least most of it. So I just want to begin with quoting the Rambam, sort of it's a quasi review of what we've spoken about. Just let me share my screen. This is the Rambam in Hilchot Tfilah, right? And Sefer Ahava. It's interesting, the book. The Rambam divided all of Jewish law into 14 books. The Shulchan Aruch divides Jewish law into 4 books. The Rambam is a much broader category. Of course, the Rambam, that doesn't take up 10 books, but the Rambam is the only one who wrote Jewish law about things that didn't apply, about Korbanot, the Beit HaMikdash, things that had no practical applicability. But the Rambam had a much grander vision of what he was doing in Sefer and the Mishnah Torah, which is, not for now exactly. Dr. Tversky, Siddur Tversky has written a lot about that, other people. And but the Rambam's first book is Mada, which today is translated as science, the book of knowledge, and Torah Mada. But that's where he talks about Yesodei Torah, the fundamentals of Judaism. The laws of idolatry are there. The laws of tshuva are there. The laws of learning Torah are there. The Hilchot Deyot, that's where the Rambam says you get 8 hours of sleep a day and how to eat healthily. You should follow the middle path. Hilchot Deyot, I don't even know how they translate that in English. Deyot, I don't know. Character traits. I don't know exactly, but that's all in Sefer Mada. The second book is Sefer Ahava, the book of love. So that's the laws of Kriyat Shema. That expresses our love of God, and of course Hilchot Tfilah, which the Rambam puts together. You see on the top of my page here, Mishnah Torah, prayer and priestly blessing. The Rambam, there are 2 mitzvot, sort of in the Rambam's count of the 613 when we pray. One is to daven, and 2 is the Kohanim have to bless us every day. Okay, that's just a broad overview. So the Rambam in the second chapter is going over the Shmona Esrei. He says, Bimei Rabban Gamliel, this we saw a little bit. Rabu Apikorsim B'Yisrael, there were a lot of heretics, however you translate Apikoros, in the Jewish people. Vayu mitzarim liYisrael amasitim otam l'shumei acharei Hashem, and they were causing tsar, pain, to the Jewish people. And a masid is one who tries to convince you to do idolatry, that the Torah discusses in Parshat Rei. I believe that the masid and the mediach, 2 people who try to convince you to do idolatry, they, in theory, get a death penalty. As a matter of fact, where the laws that normally apply, we know it's basically impossible to give a death penalty, even if you want to. Not that we want to anymore, but if you wanted to, it's next to impossible. 2 witnesses, and they have to immediately before the act, they have to warn him, and the person says, "Yes, I know, and I don't care," and then carry it immediately. It's next to impossible. But when you deal with a masid and a mediach, somebody who's trying to convince you to convert or to leave Judaism, so we're allowed to do all kinds of tricks, and we lower the rules of evidence needed to give a death penalty. I don't know what happened actually when there was a Sanhedrin, but at least in theory, the rules, the way to give a death penalty is much, much easier. Anyway, the Kelman Sharash Zug Dula Mikot Sarchei B'nei Adam, a very amazing statement. And since they saw that this is greater than any other need. In other words, the way the Rambam is presenting it sounds like the future of Judaism was under attack. And that actually is not so surprising. We're 1 generation after the destruction of the temple, or so, 1 or 2 generations after. Like, think about this like after the Holocaust. We mentioned many times, Rav Soloveitchik said, why did our generation get the state of Israel? Because we needed it. The Vilna Gaon, the Chavetz Chaim, could live without a state of Israel. After the Holocaust, the Jewish people could not have survived. Basically, that's what the Rav seems to be saying. We would not have survived without the state of Israel after we went through. So imagine what they went through at the time of the destruction of the Second Temple, and now it's even worse. Now you have half the Jews are leaving. They're becoming Hebrew Christians and etc. So this is the greatest threat. Zug dolam mikol tzarchei b'nei adam. He doesn't even say for all all the Jewish people, that like for all people. We need Judaism for the whole world. And Judaism was under serious threat. That's like it's what the Rambam seems to be saying, very powerful. Amadhu Ubeitino. So Rabban Gamliel and his court got up, and of course he doesn't mention here Shmuel. We discussed that, and they made this. We have to make a bracha, one bracha shdei b'sheila milifnei Hashem, one blessing, or it's interesting. We think of a blessing as a nice thing. A bracha just means Baruch Atah Hashem. Obviously, here it has a negative theme, but la'abed apikorsim, to destroy the Apikorsim, Kavautam betfilah. Very interesting also. And they established it in tefillah. In other words, they could have done this another time. They could have done Friday night after Kiddush. Like that's what the Rambam says. In other words, where do they make this? It's not really part of the Shmon Esrei. That's we didn't go through that. The Gemara wants to wonder what right do they have to add a 19th bracha, right? You can't just add what you want to a fixed. We had the Shmon Esrei. That was a fixed sealed book. Like we can't add a book in Tanakh. That's one of the reasons that Hanukkah is not in Tanakh, is that the Tanakh is closed. Once the Tanakh is closed, you can't add a 25th book, right? So the tefillah is closed. What do you mean you're going to add a tefillah? So the Gemara needs some kind of justification how to do it in Shmon Esrei, but it was so important, when things are really, really important, you find when there's a will, there's a way, or whatever, when there's a need, that's what you got to do. Bekavoto b'tefillah, and he established it in the tefillah. Could have been somewhere else. So everybody should know it. Why? Because the assumption is everybody davens. If you made it, I don't know, if you made it at some other ritual, we wouldn't do it. We daven 3 times a day. So we put it in tefillah because 3 times a day we want the Jews to pray for the destruction of the heretics. It really, I don't know. Okay. Nimsu kol bracha shashrei brachot. So now we find out there really are. So we find that now it's not 18 brachot, it's 19 brachot. So that's a very, I just think it's a very powerful Rambam that he summarizes what we discussed. It's interesting, he doesn't mention Shmuel Hakatan making it, but it's because it's Rabban Gamliel who asked him to do it, and that's the source of Vila Mashini. We say three times a day. Okay. Let's just notice something interesting. Vila Malshinim. So this and only one other bracha, Vila Yerushalayim Ircha, the only 2 brachot that start with a vav. Every bracha, right? Atachonein, Rifa'enu, Tekah b'shofar, Hashivenu, Slach lanu. There's no vav and, right? So why does this bracha start? Vila Malshinim. What do you mean and? What do we mean? Each bracha is kind of independent. That's why there's no vav. It's there is an order to the brachot. There we've discussed, of course. And now we're in the second half, the national brachot. But why is there a vav here? Anybody know?
Well, what's the bracha right before it?
Hashiva Shavteinu Karishona, that God should restore our justice system. Ohev Tzedakah Umishpat. And these are like, I guess, right. There's no obvious connection to the 2 bracha. Yeah, of course, there's some, every bracha in some way is connected, but we have to have justice and we have to destroy the righteous. That's part of the justice system, so to speak. But we don't have by any bracha.
There's some words censored.
Yeah, so that's this. I believe that's the scholarly answer. Thank you, Morris. That this Vila Mashini wasn't the original word. They're different versions of what exactly it started. Lemeshumadim, that some say. We've mentioned. I think many people know this is assumed to be. Most scholars assume this was initially a bracha against Hebrew Christians, against Jews who believed in Jesus, and they believed in Jesus. That was the Messiah, and but we're observant Jews. They came to shul. Like it's not a crazy thing. It's only later on that the Christian church broke from the from Judaism, but there was clearly other words, and this was censored. And a malshin is an informer, right? Malshin is an informer. It's not clear, who exactly it's referring to. They in El Bogan's book, Jewish Liturgy. I've mentioned it before. This is I don't know if anybody has this book at home. This is written by Isamar Elbogen. I believe he was a German Reform rabbi, but passed away quite a while ago. The English translation Was it done in 1992? I think the book, I have to find out exactly. And it's a sort of, he goes through with the manuscripts and difference, with the origins of the prayer. And in this, in the Roman, the Italian rite and all the various things. It's not whatever. It's considered one of the scholarly books on the Siddur. So he quotes there the church fathers who said that the non-Jews consider this, of course, an attack on Christianity, which in some way it was, but I think it was really more attack on the Jews who were practicing Christianity. But, for the Christians, they said the Jewish people are cursing the Christians 3 times a day, and that's a terrible thing. And we know there's tons of things that been either censored by the non-Jews or the Jews self-censored. There's a lot of stuff we censored so the non-Jews shouldn't accuse us of doing all kinds of things. But anyways, it seems pretty clear that here the Vav is because we don't have the original bracha. We'll have to discuss why the Vav in Vil Yerushalayim Yircha. That's not for that reason. But when we get there, hopefully in a few weeks. Okay. The other, it's interesting. He also notes that Christians didn't have any public prayer. There were no churches, whatever you want to call it, in the first century. They prayed with Jews. They had no choice. I don't know exactly when the first churches developed, but they had no. The only place they could go pray, and they were, as we say, they were observant people. And it's a harsh prayer, as we mentioned. It's very harsh. Ta'aker, just the language. Just think about it here. Where's the language here? Ta'aker is to uproot. Tishaber, break. Timager, to throw them. Tachnia, to put them down. It's very strong language. Shover oivim, umachnia, you break the enemies. And zaydim, who are zaydim? Zaydim is from the word mezid, on purpose, right? There's shogeg, machnias. In other words, they're purposely out to harm the Jewish religion. I believe in the Otzer Hatfilot Siddur, he quotes that Zaydim, very interesting, is Amalek. So I don't know if he means like the original Amalek or he means Amalek in the sense that we use it today, the descendants of Amalek. There's a famous Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, the Rav's grandfather, based on a analysis of the Rambam. He didn't make it up like just because it's, it sounds nice. He says the Rambam writes that the 7 nations no longer exist. The mitzvah to destroy the 7 nations that were in Israel, Knani, Amori, Prizi, Vusi, Girgasi, whatever, they don't exist. Bas Sancheriv Bilbel had Talmud. Sancheriv, when the Assyrians exiled the 10 tribes, Sancheriv, he mixed everybody up, like kind of what Yosef did, sort of. You move people around, you mix them up, and ammonia, Amori, and that's why we don't know who's who, and therefore the Talmud says even an Ammoni man, like Ruth was a Moabite woman, right? A Moabite below Moabite, we could convert them. But today we have no idea who a Moabite man or Moabite woman is, and therefore we can marry them and all kinds, no issues. Okay, that's for another time. But that's a halakhic acceptable. That's a halakhic idea that Sancheriv mixed everybody up. But the Rambam in the next halacha, I didn't have it here because I didn't think I would talk about it. In the next halacha, the Rambam talks about Amalek. There's a mitzvah to wipe out the 7 nations. Amalek is not one of the 7 nations. That's why they're so bad. In other words, we understand why people living in Israel would want to go to war with the Jewish people. We're taking over that. Whatever. I don't want to talk politics, but we understand why Palestinians don't like Jews. I get it. They're Arabs living in Israel. They feel, rightly or wrongly, we're taking their territory. We mistreat them. But what does Iran have to do with anything? They're not even Arab. Why does Iran have against us? They're, hundreds of miles away. So that's like much worse. So Amalek, we didn't pass by Amalek. We didn't ask in the desert to pass through. They weren't in Israel. That's much worse. So Amalek's a separate category. And the Rambam doesn't say the wording by, he uses the Shivat Amim, the 7 nations, Kvar Avad Zichram. Their memory is no longer. They're lost. We don't know who they are. But the Rambam does not use that language by Amalek. So some say, okay, he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to say it once. It's obvious. The same thing applies. But no, Reb Chaim Soloveitchik said, no, the Rambam's being very exact. That Amalek still exists. We still have Amalek, even if we don't know who they are biologically. And people who want to destroy the Jewish people for no reason. The errors wouldn't be Amalek for no reason. I think Rav Chaim added they don't believe in God. They have to have below Yarei Elohim, right? They deny God. Whatever, communist Russia, I think maybe that's what he was referring to. I don't know exactly. Has a status of Amalek, whatever that means. But we do have in our tradition, and we just got very harsh things to say about that. It came up the end of last class, right? What we say about people who violate the Shabbat, and today we have different attitudes. That's okay. We discussed that a little bit last week, but this, enemies have to be dealt with. And we quoted Rabbi Herring's article. There is room. He claims that Jewish tradition does say. Bavod Rishayim Rina. It's not only being folei v'chal tismach. We don't only say when your enemy falls, don't rejoice. We say that, but we also say when evil is eradicated, you have to be happy and rejoice. And obviously, those two contradict each other, and you have to sort of balance and find out which is which. But so this is a bracha on Bavod Rishayim Rina, that when evil is destroyed, we're very happy and we enjoy, and it's a prayer. But you see, in the Rambam, this was a threat to the continuation of Judaism. And kind of like, I don't know, it reminds me, the Rambam writes on the Karaites. For many years, the Karaites were a serious threat to Judaism. And the Karaites, they don't have nice things to say about the Karaites. Today, has anybody ever been to a Karaite shul or been in the Karaite community? So you go, they have one in the old city. I haven't ever been inside. Karaites are like nice. When Daniel Lasker, I believe, gave on Torah Motion a couple years ago a 3-part series on the Karaites. It was fascinating. It was really fascinating. They weren't some idiots or they just read the Bible fundamentally literist. Of course, they had a whole theology, and it was weak because we're not threatened by the Karaites. So there are a few thousand of them. There are some left. They're in San Francisco. They have a shul in Israel. They have. But it's like a curiosity. These are interesting Jews. They were once part of our community. They didn't accept the oral law. But when the Karaites outnumbered the Rabbinites, which is probably true for quite a bit of time, that the Karaites were bigger and stronger, they were a real threat, real threat. And therefore, we had very terrible things to say about them. The Rambam, interestingly, says, though, this is very important for nowadays, and all the entire Kiruv movement is based on this Rambam, that the Rambam says, yeah, we don't like the Karaites. And if they fall into a pit, you don't save their life on Shabbos, and they're like awful people. But that's only the founders of Karaism. Those who were educated, went to a Karaite school. What do you want from them? They were brought up as Karaites. So we have to love them. We have to be closer to them. So this is, of course, it's a well-known, this is a very important Rambam in Hilchot Mamrim, that we can only be upset at the people who make a break with Judaism. Somebody brought up that way. How far do you extend the Rambam? I mean, if people are brought up, in Gaza to hate Jews, like from the time they nursed their mother's milk, like, I don't know who's like if you think about these things, it's very, yes, we're all products of how we're brought up, and therefore, what do you want? But the Rambam does say that we can't be upset at the children of the Karaites because that's how they were brought up, that's how they were educated, and obviously, so we have to reach out to them. And that's really is the basis of the Kiruv movement. It reminds me of the Ram in a buzzer. I don't think I mentioned this, but tell me if I did on Christmas time. So the Mishnah in Avodah Zarah says, you're not allowed to do business with an idolater 3 days before their festival, because idolater is a nice religious idolater. He's going to close $1 million deal with you. He's going to go to his church on Christmas Day, and he's going to announce, I'm giving $200,000 to charity. I just closed a business with Goldberg, and he's such a nice Jewish boy. And because of that nice business deal, we can now dedicate our church and make it nicer. So that's really because we're afraid 3 days they're going to go and thank God, their gods, for their business. So it's an amazing Mishnah. So of course Tosfot bothered We all do that. You don't go shopping on Friday in a store owned by a Christian. That's 3 days before his festival. So that's a toast with you. What is this? So he has all kinds of answers. We've discussed the answer Christians aren't idolaters. We don't consider them idolaters anymore. We once did. Same way, things change. It's people don't realize things change. Our attitudes towards Christianity today, we generally don't consider them idolaters. Whether that's because we see idolatry as a moral sin and it's different for whatever the reasons beyond what we're discussing now, though I guess it is related to the bracha. But one of the answers Tosfot give, which is like, wow. Like you read this answer, it's like it blows my mind. Tosfot says, yeah, they go to church, but you know why they go to church? Their parents schlep them. They don't really believe in it. Their parents make them go to church, so it doesn't really count. They go and they take their prayer book and they do their whatever, the wine and the blood and Jesus and Mary, but they don't really believe in it because it's just what their parents do. When they get old, so it's like really unbelievable. Well, because I don't care about the Christian aspect of what Tosfos says. I care about us. Like there is, what do we practice Judaism because we believe in it, because that's how our parents brought us up. Now it's a fine line. We don't want to give kids. You have to bring them up in a certain way. But there is something that if a kid has no choice, if you're just forced to do something, that's why the Amish, right? Don't they give them a week off or a year off? I know. Correct me. I once asked before.
A year.
A year off, right? So we don't do that. We don't. We don't.
Ringsprungen.
I'm sorry.
I think it's called Ringsprungen or something like that.
What language is that?
Amish.
Oh, that's okay. Okay.
It's a form of German.
But I think that's a really powerful idea. So you see that in our tradition a lot. We can't get upset at people who are raised in a certain way. Really, the application of this is, is really, you have to think about it. It's really quite powerful. But the Vilamalshini was composed in the time that people were doing it. They were that first generation, and it's full of hate. So, anyways, listen. What can we expect? There are certain things, no matter how you're raised, we expect a certain, that's a debate. And philosophers and religion is their natural morality. Can we expect people to be more without the Torah? And I think the Torah's answer is pretty clear. When Abraham says to Abimelech, Abimelech says, why did you lie about your wife, saying she's your sister? Well, we have that a few times in Bereshit. They didn't fear God. What do they fear God? God didn't reveal themselves. They weren't assigned any mitzvot. They didn't get a Torah. What do you want from them? No, there's an understanding as a human being. You have a natural moral sense that you should know. And anyway, so the
You have it in this week's parsha.
Yeah, of course, you have it in this week's parsha. Shifram Pua. Thank you, especially if we assume they are not Jewish. Thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. So that's so how this all plays in, I don't know. But we have to balance this. I think we are in a time where the idea that praying for hate is difficult for us. It should be difficult. That's why Shmuel HaKatan had to compose it, because Shmuel HaKatan was the one who said, be very sad when your enemies fall, are hurt. So, anyways, I don't know. It is, and I don't know exactly what we're supposed to think about when we say V'la Malshinim today. Who the Malshinim? But I guess we talk about the enemies of the Jewish people, but it's mainly the internal. Although it was talking about the Christians, but not necessarily Christians as Christians as ex-Jews. We know throughout Jewish history being a Malshin, sort of like compared to being a Moser, one who tells the people, and that's how some of I think Rav Soloveitchik has it. These people came to Shul, and then they would report to the Romans what the Jews are doing, very negative, and then they would hear then they would persecute the Jews. That's a Malshin. So we had no pity on them. Being a Moser, right? Everybody knows, or being especially people who grew up in Europe, the worst thing you could tell the Jew, he's a Moser. He hands over Jewish property, even only Jewish property, to non-Jewish authorities. They would kill you. That was halacha Moser. It's very important to point out, according to, I'd say my poskim, whatever our poskim, today in a democracy, there's very little Nasira, if anything. And I know there was, it was in one of the RJJ Journals of Allah in Contemporary Society, where somebody was arrested. These religious guys, quote unquote, were arrested. I don't know, India or Japan for smuggling. They did something illegal and they were caught. So the Frum community raises money. Let's get them out of jail. And they asked the Rav Shlomo Zalman Aruch. Rav Shlomo Zalman Aruch said, "Wait a minute, get money to get them in jail. They belong in jail. Your money, so they'll stay in jail." Well, what do you mean? You break the law in Canada, the United States. We're two different countries. I just want to make that clear to everybody. Canada and the United States. So you break the law, you go to jail. You have to pay, and that's why Rav Moshe Feinstein says you can be a prosecuting lawyer, a district attorney. You're gonna turn Jews in. Okay, if they break the law, they have to be punished. Masira is dealing in times where we're dealing with a government that persecutes Jews. That's a very different story. We're not in that situation, thank God, anymore, despite the rise in anti-Semitism. It's still, there's no comparison. Okay, let's move on, unless anybody has any questions.
Kelman,
Yes.
how can anyone say Shifra and Pur were Egyptians? It says Beferish the Pasuk that he
No,
spoke.
Me'aldot Ha'Ivriyot couldn't mean the Me'aldot for the Ivriyot.
Right. Meal dope could be right.
Me'aldot, yeah. So that's the commentaries are split 50-50. Half of them say they were Jewish, half of them say they're Egyptian. Now, I always think, and all these debates, so the term Me'aldot Ha'Ivriyot were the midwives for the Hebrews, not Hebrew midwives, right? That's unclear. The question, why does the Torah make it unclear? That's the real question. The Torah could have made it clear that, but the Torah wants to show there are two ways. I'm in the middle. That's what my Dvar Torah, I think, is going to be about. That it can be, sometimes it's non-Jews who save us, and sometimes Jews who save us. In other words, we should understand the story. Shifra and Pua were Jewish. One way to understand the story. Shifra and Pua are not Jewish. It's another way to understand the story. The Torah does this 5 million times. Every other verse in the Torah that there's a debate. When Rashi and Ramban argue what it means, each one knows the other one could be right. The Torah did that on purpose. The Torah wants them to debate. That's a thing that we don't teach enough. In other words, when all this debates about every 99.9%, who sold Yosef? We were all taught, everybody was raised, the brothers sold Yosef, the Rashbam, and the more pshat is, it wasn't the brothers, it was the Mijan. While the brothers were discussing what to do, by Avru Anashim Mijanim Socharim, by Shichu, they pulled them out. Well, who's they? The they should be the meaning, not the brothers who were mentioned earlier. But why does the Torah make that unclear? Because the Torah wants us to understand the story one way. Yosef sold, the brothers sold, and it's a different story if they sold, because the Torah doesn't care about historical events. The Torah's not written for what happened. The Torah's written for us, for a moral lesson. So who cares? I don't care. Yaakov and Esav. Was Yaakov, when he stole the bracha, was he right or wrong? The Torah is ambiguous. Now we know he's separate again.
Rabbi J,
yes.
The brothers were there.
The brothers what?
The brothers were there when somebody else pulled them out. They're bystanders.
No, they were eating lunch. They were eating lunch. That's
Rabbi,
Rabbi, I remember that.
Don't give them points. Don't give them points. They never asked Mechila or Slicha. Never did.
So that's okay. I don't want to get into Parshat Shavua too much, but yes,
we are suffering.
Did Yaakov Avinu ever find out what happened? Very unclear. The simple meaning, unlikely that he found out, but we don't know for sure. And right, lots of things we don't know, and the Torah leaves it there on purpose for us to think. We fill in the blank, and every person and every generation and for different communities, it makes sense to fill in the blank this way, and for a different community, it makes sense to fill out the blank a different way. That's what we mean, Shivim Panim LaTorah. There's 70 faces to the Torah. The Torah is purposely vague. It's purposely unclear. So that's on purpose. Yeah, what Susan's saying, the Chacham Levu, it says, I don't know that she quotes that view. I don't know that she agrees. No way we part tell Jewish midwives. Yeah, I forget how they deal with that question. Right, that's why we assume they aren't Jewish. The reason say they're not Jewish, how could he tell Jewish midwives to do that? But I don't know. Is that true 100%?
Avi Weiss.
She was strong about that. She was strong that they weren't Jewish.
Okay, right. And Rashi assumes they're Yocheved and Miriam, of course, the Midrash. Shifra, Yocheved and Miriam. And Bayas them, but Batim, Batekuna, Bolivia. I mean, Rashi takes the very, but you're right. I have to look that up. I don't remember. But it's both. It's unclear. Yes.
The Torah gives lots of clues that they were Jewish. It says later on that they feared God. That's
so what? That could, so what does that have to do with being Jewish?
Why would Egyptian midwives fear our God?
Who said they feared our God? They feared. There's one
It
God.
says
They
they
feared
feared
God.
God. The pasuk says beferish. They feared Hashem. And on
No,
top of that,
Batirana me'odot Elohim or something. So
no, it
Elohim is
says
the
they
God of
feared
nature.
God. The
Yeah.
pasuk, read
So
the
what?
pasuk. And
Non-Jews fear God. No, that
furthermore,
doesn't.
their names are Semitic names. They wouldn't be Egyptians.
What do you mean?
Shifra and Pua are
Moshe has an
Semitic
Egyptian
names.
name. I don't know. The names don't. I don't know.
They are Semitic names. They're not Egyptian names.
I have no idea. That I don't know. All I know is we'll have to move on and leave that for later. But all I know is the Meforshim are split 50-50. I don't know exactly 50-50. But yes, a significant portion say they were Jewish, and a significant portion. My point is, I don't care if they were Jewish or not Jewish. It's not relevant. The Torah leaves it that we can read the story both ways. With that's all we have to. We have to read the story both ways, and it's a slightly different story. And then you have to answer the question: but they're Jewish. How could part do that? What are they doing? Yeah, fearing God. But non-Jews, when Avram told Avimelech, that I just quoted, Rak ein yirat Elohim b'makom hazeh, there's no fear of God. He's talking to non-Jews. He's not talking Jews. The fear of God is something we expect everybody to have. One of the Sheva Mitzvah b'nei Noach is not to do idolatry, to believe there's a God. V'nemar vayashem lemelech hakol haaretz. Everybody's going to accept God. We won't all be Jewish. We're not going to be Jewish. We're just going to accept there's one God. We don't want we don't even want them to become Jewish, right? We make it hard to convert. We just want them to acknowledge that there's a God in the world. There's morality. And that's why that's the Dennis Prager famous, he always would quote, if you're walking home alone at night, and you're going in an alley and you see 10 burly guys coming towards you, would you feel more relieved if you found that they just came from a Bible class, a church Bible class? So we all would feel relieved. But if you lived in the 1400s, you wouldn't feel relieved. You feel they're coming from the church, they may kill you. Things change. We understand today. We think it's good. I think it's terrible that Christmas is all materialistic. Primarily, I don't know exactly. Obviously, I don't. But how many Christians go to church on Christmas Day? It's about presents and the tree and the this and the that. That's not Christmas. Christmas is a religious holiday. I wish because secularism is a religion. It's just a much worse religion, So I much prefer the non-Jews go to church. Yeah, sometimes you have religions that are very anti-Jewish, so that's a problem. Extreme Islam, that's idolatry. But normal Islam, many Muslims are not anti-Jewish. Generally, religion today, that's the Meiri's whole point. Christianity today teaches to be a moral person, to be a good person. They're not idolaters. They believe in 3 gods. Big deal. That's between them. That's not our problem. Religion is I don't mean it's fascistly. I don't mean like for us it's a problem. But that's the Meiri's famous idea that if a religion teaches moral values, that's not idolatry by definition. Okay, can we move on to Al Hatzadikim?
I just wanted to say that Avi Weiss writes about this in he has a book called Loving Torah.
Okay.
And that Sforno says that it was non-Jewish Mieldot, and Rashi writes that it was Jewish Mieldot.
Right.
It's a reflection of their time.
Of course. So I was just saying, Sforno was known to be very close to. I think one of his very good friends was a Christian priest. I don't know the whole story there. I have to look it up. But absolutely, we're influenced by our Sforno. Yes, my uncle used to tell me that. My uncle who founded, Prospect Park, the school in New York. My uncle would often say that you find very negative attitudes towards non-Jews in the Talmud and very much more positive. And he would say often it depended when they lived. If you went through the Holocaust, like my grandfather, I mentioned this before, my grandmother would tell me if she ever brought in a Polish cleaning lady, my grandfather would have killed her. I mean, because he lost, members of his family, Poland, and, that's just terrible. I grew up in Canada, a beautiful country. We want to keep it that way, right? Non-Jews are nice people, and it's very different. And they said that's in the Talmud. So obviously you're going to have, Rashi grew up under persecution. Absolutely. He's going to have a very negative view. That's, if you're a human being, you're influenced. I know in yeshivas, they don't like to say that because they think Torah somehow totally, it's not true. We're all human beings. Yes, Yocheved.
Rabbi Kelman?
Yeah.
You just reminded me many, many years ago. I went to Prospect Park. So in 12th grade, your uncle gave the Pirkei Avos class.
Okay.
And I remember finding it fascinating at the time because we really weren't exposed to this. He he taught it to us. He first gave us the background of each Tana, whoever, etc., whoever was saying whatever he was saying. He was showing the connection between their time
Ah,
or the way they're
there you
described
go.
in the Gemara and what they said. So
Thank you. Michael was a special person, really. He was, he was really, and unfortunately, he was orphaned. My grandfather, who I'm named for, passed away when my father was 9. Michael was 15. My grandmother raised 6 kids in the 1930s, in Depression years, and whatever. But my uncle was really, and yes, but he was more modern than Prospect Park is today, that's for sure. But anyways, and by the way, just one other thing I'll say, just interesting talking about Christian and influence and all that. He he went to University of Toronto. My uncle, they were living in Toronto. They moved to New York, but my father came back to Toronto. But so he went to University of Toronto in the 1940s. And in those days, you had to take courses in Bible as a requirement. You had to take a well-rounded education. And of course, the Bible was taught from a critical perspective, the documentary hypotheses, etc. And my uncle told me it actually strengthened his faith. It was the first time in his life he had to face serious questions. These were not idiots. These professors are not stupid people. They're raising serious questions, many of which were raised by our rabbis. Chazal raised many of these problems. And Rabbi Yishmael, we say every day, the rabbis were aware. Of course, the Torah contradicts itself. But he said he was forced to sort of study the Torah and to find the traditional response. It was just not fun interesting. Some people, you're right, if you're never exposed to they'll become apikorsim, obviously. That's why, we believe it's good to expose people to all kinds of things. I think most of the people here believe that. If you're totally, totally sheltered and then you throw into University of Toronto, somebody talk about documentary hypotheses, then you really can lose your entire faith. That goes without saying. But if you are prepared for it, so I think that was a fascinating thing. I remember him telling me it strengthened his faith that he had to study. He had university professors telling him. He also told us, if I can say that, my mohel, those who live in Toronto know Dr. Cass, who did was in his class. And I heard this from Dr. Cass himself when he was giving a Gemara Shir once. And Dr. Cass said he had to take this course in university on biblical criticism. And he wrote at the bottom of this essay he had to hand in, their final paper. He wrote, long after your bones are rotting in hell, the truth of the Torah will be proven. So that takes a young kid with chutzpah to write it, especially some of you applying to medical school. I don't know if I would write that, but he got into medical school, and then he was the mohel for thousands of babies in Toronto, including me, myself. So anyways, but it was a different era. Today, what can I tell? Okay, can we al hatzadikim? Let's discuss. Okay, any other comments, questions? It's supposed to be on the Siddur. What can we do? Judaism, every kol Torah kula inyan achad, right? That's the entire Torah is one topic. That's what there's a expression like that. I forget where that is. Rav Shechter used to quote that. Said there's no such thing as, what do you mean you're off topic? The entire Torah is one topic. Okay, al hatzadikim v'al hachasidim v'al ziknei amcha beit Yisrael. The total opposite. The total opposite. We just were praying hatred, destroy our enemies, destroy those people who are talebearers. Now we're going to pray for the righteous. Of course, this was here. The Shidim was an add-on. Now we're going to pray. So it's not like it wasn't composed in response, for sure. There's no vav, but it's not composed in response to Moshe because this is way, way hundreds of years earlier. So we'll go through all the Chasidim, Tzadik, Chasid, Ziknei, Amcha, Pleita, Sofreim, Geirei, Tzedek, Aleinu. They're basically 6 people, 6 types of people who get back there. There's a Tzadik, a Chasid, Ziknei, Amcha, the elders of the Jewish people, Pleita, Sofreihem, the remnants of the scribes, whatever that means, Geirei, Tzedek, converts, righteous converts, that's 5, Aleinu. And us, normal, regular people, we're without any special, not tzaddikim, not chasidim, regular Jews. It's like whoever says this, we're always aleinu. In other words, somebody else is a chasid, and we should never think that we're the tzaddik, the chasid, right? Aleinu and us, and then we say, God have mercy on us. So first of all, I believe I didn't count every word, but if you look, well, here I did count every word, but if you look, I believe this is the longest bracha of the 13 brachot in the middle part. Obviously, Modim's longer, but that's not really this part of the Shemon Esrei, right? Atachonen is short. Hashivenu Avinu is short. Slach Lanu is short. Ravenu is a little longer, but it's not quite as long. Lo Mashlim is also a little longer. Vili Yerushalayim is short. That Tzemach David is short. They're all very short. Shema Kolenu a little bit longer. So this is the longest bracha. I don't know if it means anything. Just I guess we're praying for the righteous. They need a lot of our prayers. I don't know. I just whatever. Praying for 6 types of people. I really mentioned it because in the tour he quotes this is the longest. How many words? Anybody know how many words there are? So Zev, we're going to have a different count for words. Nusach Chabad, Nusach Sfar, but in the nice Nusach Ashkenaz Siddur that the tour used and I'm using, how many words? Anybody know? 42. 42 words. So 42 is right one of the names of God, the significance. We're not so into this, but there's a whole school of thought that they would count words. As a matter of fact, Sofrehem, what's Vav Plektat Sofrehem? What's a Sofer? The Gemara says, you know what a Sofer is? They would spore. They would count the letters of the Torah. They would count. I should have actually brought the Gemara, but maybe we'll see if I have a chance. They were called Sofrim. The Gemara because they actually counted. Now, I don't know. Literally, I guess it means a little, but it means they knew the Torah like backwards and forward. They knew the Torah by heart. And of course, a scribe, it's the same. A scribe has to know every single letter. They would count the letters. So the Gemara has a discussion. What's the middle letter of the Torah? So this one says this one says, I don't understand. Take out a Sefer Torah and count. I mean, what's the middle? Today, you don't have to count. Put it in a computer. How many letters? I don't know. How many words are in the Torah? 305,000 or something words in the Torah. And figure it out. So you know what the Gemara says? We can't do that because we're not so sure. We're not beki'im, bechaserat v'yaterat. We don't know when there is a vav, when there isn't a vav. Our Torah may have a vav. The Torah of Sinai may not have a vav. This is one of the famous Gemaras that they used to show that the Rambam couldn't have meant that every single letter came from Sinai or that the Torah we have today because the Gemara says it black and white. We don't know. We're not Bekim. We're not experts. And the Gemara says they had 3 Sifrei Torah in the Azara in the temple. And when there was a question, what's the right word? They would look in the 3 in the Torah, and they would if 2 of the 3 said like that, that's what they would use. In other words, they didn't agree. And I've mentioned many times they're very minor differences, but still, we don't have a agreed upon Sefer Torah that everyone agrees to. Communities, the Yemenite community has their own Sefer Torah. I think there are 9 differences. I'm not up on this 100%. But anyways, the Sofrim were the people who counted the letters, who knew, or gets later on understood what's Divrei Sofrim. What's Divrei Sofrim? So we read the Megillah, our obligation to hear the Megillah on Purim is Midivrei Sofrim. Midivrei Sofrim from the words of the rabbis. I mean, it just means it's rabbinic law, usually derived from something in Tanakh. So Divrei Sofrim, the Sofrim were the people who interpreted the Torah. They counted the letters, they knew the letters, they wrote the Torah letter by letter, but they were the ones who interpreted the Torah. That's how many the Divrei Sofrim are the experts in Torah Shabbat al Peh. But anyway, so that's so there was this notion that the tefillot should have exact words. We don't play around with the words. I think this the Hasidic Ashkenaz were into this. I think in Kabbalistic literature, which I know nothing about, this is important stuff, like to have exact words. And that's you don't just add words here. I think today we're not as I don't know, necessarily as careful, and for sure Nusach Sfar that changed a lot of the words and different things. But anyways, I just whatever. This is the longest bracha, 42 word. Okay. And in a sense, Vilam al Shinim and al Hatzadikim is the notion of Surmei Rava Asetov. The way we have it today, first we pray to get rid of evil, to freak out of evil, and then Asetov. So the Vilam al Shinim is like Surmei Ra, and al Hatzadikim is Asetov. Okay. So what's the difference between a tzaddik and a chassid? So you can say in a lot of these things, they mean the same thing. You know, the Torah repeats itself often. So we were all trained, and it's a nice thing. The Torah there's always a reason for repetition. It's not That's not, Rabbi Shmuel doesn't agree with that. Even Ezra doesn't agree with that. There's strands in our tradition. The Brat Torah Kilshon B'nei Adam, which I'm sure most of you also heard. The Torah speaks in the language of men. So the Torah repeats it. It had changed the word here because that's how people speak. You never say the exact same words. When you tell over the same story 5 times, each time it's the same story, but you're going to say different words. So that's what the Ibn Ezra says. The Ibn Ezra goes so far to say that by the Aseret HaDibrot, they're different. Who cares? It doesn't mean anything. This is like, wow. And the Chamalibutz could not stand that approach. Wow. She so much didn't like that approach. The Rashi approach, the approach we were brought, every word, every letter, that's the Rabbi Akiva approach, every et. But that's Rabbi Yishmael says, no, he didn't agree with that approach. So, but even if you take Rashi's approach at every word and every letter, still it may add something, but it's done as a repetition. It's done as emphasis. It's done for poetic reasons, all kinds of reasons. So often, tzaddikim, chassidim, it's saying the same thing many different ways. The righteous people should have mercy upon them. So on a certain level, we're just saying the same thing a number of times. But of course, each one has a unique meaning, although different commentaries have different, exactly what the difference is. But I think the standard difference. What's the difference between a tzaddik and a chassid? And we're not talking about the Hasidim of the Baal Shem Tov, right? This is before the Baal Shem Tov. And so I'm sorry to disappoint, right? It's, I think that's obvious for us, but I think often it isn't obvious to people because they're as soon as they see the word Chassid, an image pops in their mind. I think we all instinctively, I probably even do, we all do that. It's somehow, I don't know, you tell me if you don't, but it's pops into our mind, a Chassid, the Payas and the Bekish and the Gartel, But anyways, that's how Moshe Rabbeinu dressed, obviously, right? But what is it, a tzaddik and a chassid? So I'm going to start with since nobody wants to speak up yet so soon, I'm going to start with the Rambam's definition of a tzaddik, which is probably not the way most people understand this here, but I've quoted it before, but just to see it inside, it's really cool. The Rambam's so amazing, always, okay. So the Rambam says like this. This is in Hilchot Shuvah, just a little bit before Hilchot Tfilah, chapter 3. Every single person, Bnei Adam, again, remember that term Adam that we saw before. Adam means humanity, Jews and non-Jews. When he wants to say Jews, it's Bnei Israel. Adam is always the reference to humanity. Every human being has good points and bad points, has merits and sins. That's what it means to be a human. One who has more merits than demerits is a tzaddik. But one who has more demerits than merit points, he's a rasha. 50% plus 1, either way. Mechsa al mechsa, that's like a little bit hard. 50-50. Exactly 50-50. You're a Benoni. How many? That's right. And according to the Rambam, Aseret Yimei Tshuva is only for Benonim. We're supposed to think we're Benonim, but the chances that any of us are Benonim are like 1 in 50 million. I mean, what do you have? 50-50? Like everything you do the whole year, you're exactly the same and good about that's like next to impossible. And then the Rambam says this is true by every nation. We judge not only individuals, we judge nation. And the Rambam then goes on, and the Rambam, of course, it says it's not just a numerical count, there's a qualitative count. What does he say? She calls it Einolafim Minyan. It's not just numbers. It's according to their Godlam, how big they are. Yesh Chut, there's some merits, that knocks out 10. One mitzvah can get you 10 points, and you need 10 sins against it. Or chas v'shalom, the opposite, yesh avon. Some sins are so great, it's not, you can't just do any, eat a kosher meal sometime and you knock it out. So that's, ain't shoklim ele b'dato el. And the only one who knows the count, of course, is God. That's the only one. So obviously, like we pretend we're Beinonim, but that's the Rambam's definition of a tzaddik. If you're a little better, if you're 51% good. I think in many ways that's very reassuring. It's also depressing because you become a rasha at 51%. But hopefully it's not so hard. Now, what the Rambam says, the count, I think it's important to point out that the Meshech Chochmah says that, mitzvot take on historical importance. At different historical times, mitzvot have different historical meanings. It's a little bit on the surface sound radical. This is the Meshech Chochmah, died in 1926. The great, the Or Sameach, wrote the Or Sameach on the Rambam, the Meshech Chochmah on the Chumash. And he actually, it's next week's Parsha, the famous Medrash, that why we were redeemed from Egypt, because whatever, the various Midrashim, we didn't change our names, our language, our clothing, different things the Medrash says. So here we are. I dress like, regular non-Jew. I'm speaking English. And my name is Jay. I violated every one of the famous midrashim. Like, I don't deserve to be redeemed from Egypt. That's, what's going on here? So Rav Moshe Feinstein deals with that. He said, no big deal. He says that's before there was a Torah. When there was no Torah, what kept us as Jews? Your Jewish name, your Jewish language. Once there's a Torah, I got Shabbos, Kashrus, Tefillin, Mezuzah, Shabbos. Well, I don't need a Jewish name. Not so important. And look, many of our great rabbis and them with a non-Jewish name. So I'm Jay. We all grew up in the generation. Not all of us. I can look at some of your names, but many we grew up. We all have English names. Many of us have English names, and our kids all have Hebrew names. No, that's times change. So the Meshech Chochmah there discusses that mitzvot take on different historical importance at different times. At different times, and at that time that was mitzvah, and sometimes the least important mitzvot become very important, and the most important mitzvot are not so important, and it changes. Rav Schachter uses this idea when he wrote the article 40 years ago on the mitzvah of living in Israel. He said, our generation, the mitzvah to live in there was a mitzvah in the 1200s to live in Israel too. All right, so he moved to Israel, big deal. Like you starved and there was no economy. Like somebody had to send you money from Chutzart. Wasn't you didn't accomplish so much. Today it's you build up a country. You can even do that from here on a certain level. But the historical notion of mitzvot change. I think that's just an important concept. We live in the real world. Torah is meant for the real world. Of course, all mitzvot are binding. Or when if they're practical, they're binding at all time. But how important they are really can vary with what's going on in the world around us. Okay. That's a very important point. But what's the classical def? So what is the difference between? So a tzaddik means you do more good than bad. I guess everybody agrees, but we normally think of a tzaddik, and I think that's the mention. Here's last matter of fact, one of the Meforshim, I forget who said, someone who never sins. Well, what do you mean someone who never sins? There's no such creature. So it means someone who's a tzaddik. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Rav Moshe Feinstein, that's a tzaddik. By the way, you don't want the Chafetz Chaim, right? Everybody knows the famous line, right? You don't want a tzaddik writing a halacha book. I mean that not jokingly. That's what the people have said that. When the Chafetz Chaim writes a book on halacha, so the Chafetz Chaim is worried about every little opinion. You should never follow it. The classical poskim, I don't want to get into trouble here, all said we follow the Aruch HaShulchan, don't follow the Mishnah Berurah. They said, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, for example, the classic idea was the Mishnah Berurah was written for Bnei Yeshiva. People learning in yeshiva, okay, they can be strict like the Mishnah Berurah. Regular people, they don't need the Mishnah Torah. The Chafetz Chaim was such a tzaddik, so there's some view in the middle of nowhere. Don't do this. So the Chafetz Chaim is going to change the halacha, how you can follow each view. Yotzei kol hashitot. He wants to fulfill all obligations, and that's not the classic approach in Psak. We choose. No, I'm being makel. Kochta teradiv. We follow it. So there are opinions who disagree. Big deal. I don't have to worry about every opinion. That's the classic approach to halakha. That was the approach of the Aruch HaShulchan, and that's why the classic idea was that balabatim, normal people, regular people, follow the Aruch HaShulchan. B'nai yeshiva, okay, someone who's a tzaddik, yeah, he should follow. He should be machmir. There is room to be machmir. Ala machmir tavo bracha. You get less, but that's if you're doing all the basics. So and what's happened today is everybody follows the Mishnah Berurah. I mentioned last week why there's another, why the Mishnah Berurah shouldn't be translated into English. If you don't know Hebrew, you shouldn't be reading the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah is not for you if you can't read it in the original. That's my view, but okay, other people will disagree. But so there is yeah.
So I would add that perhaps the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is also.
Oh yeah, no, don't
that is
that book. Do not mention that book in the 21st century. If you want to turn someone off, no, I mean this in all seriousness. Maybe it was an appropriate book. It was in Hungary. Rav Shlomo Gonzfried, the big Talmud Chacham, And he wrote a very important book, and for Hungarian Jewry, it was very nice. Sarin Shulchan Aruch. You bring that to American kids. You want to turn off kids of Judaism, learn the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. I'm sorry, I don't know what else to say. It is.
Right. I just want to point out that many elementary schools, I remember that was because the
Correct.
Hebrew is easy enough for children.
When I
to
was
read,
young, when I was in
just
grade
find
10
us
in high
and
school,
learn.
they taught us Kitzur Shulchan Aruch too, and thank God I don't remember anything from it. I don't want to remember anything from it. I don't want to chas v'shalom. I don't misunderstand me. But he's Hungarian Orthodoxy, which is totally different, the most extreme Hungarian Orthodoxy. It's a turnoff to people like me. I don't know. Maybe you're different, but it doesn't speak to American kids. That you have to know. You have to know. Well, Psaki, you have to know here. That's why it's a Mara de Atra. That's we've said 1,000 times. Two people ask the same question, get a different response, because the halacha has to know you, your circumstances. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is not for us. Listen, there are always people. Many people are against any code for this reason. Code. I'm not bound by what Rav Yosef Kar. Why do I have to be bound by what Rav Yosef Kar said? Ela shofet asher yeh bayamim hahem. You go to the people of that generation. You don't worry about everything, but we need codes because life it's too hard otherwise. But there's a lot to be said to be anti-codes, and there's so much in our tradition against it. We sort of have no choice. But the kids are right. So the Chayei Adam is much better than the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. And you know the whole joke. Why did they call it Chayei Adam? So nobody would write a Kitzur Chayei Adam. Right? Okay. All right. You can write a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. Nobody's going to write a Kitzur Chayei Adam. Okay. If you don't get the joke, well, what can I do? Chayei Adam means the life of a person. Nobody's going to write a short life. Okay. But it is important that to know what books. So at what stage in life do you give somebody a book about even not about tshuva, but especially about tshuva? You're not going to give them there. This is I have it here. Happens to be sitting here. I mentioned this book before. Nobody uses this anymore. Give me a second here. To Be a Jew. Anybody read this book? It's a fantastic book, written in the 70s. Today, maybe it's I don't know. It's somehow it's too I don't know why. Too much. It's basics, Aleph-Bet of Yiddishkeit, written by
Donin.
Yeah. He also wrote the book that I use sometimes here, To Pray as a Jew. I don't have the cover for that one. I think he was a rabbi in Detroit, and then he made Aliyah. I think he passed away a young man, unfortunately. But this was a fantastic book. This is like, basic stuff. Another book I read as a kid, I haven't seen it in years, I don't remember, 8 questions people ask on Judaism. You remember that one? Telushkin and Prager. When Dennis Prager was more traditional than he is today, but whatever. Him and Joseph Telushkin, who's written many, many books. He's, many fantastic books. Actually, I give his books often. Here's one of them.
Jewish literacy.
Our mitzvah present to kids who aren't yeshiva boys. This is one of them. He wrote all these books, the basic Judaism, Jewish wisdom. They're fantastic. They're just basics, Sefer Todah. There are all these wonderful books that today, everybody's learning Daf Yomi. They don't have time to learn the basics of Judaism. They're worried about, if you throw the blood here, is it Yotzei, the mitzvah? Like a little bit, too many people are learning Daf Yomi. I'm sorry, but Daf Yomi is great because it gives them to learn, but really it's not for many, many people would get much better Jewish education than they learn. And that if they went to a Daf Yomi shir every day, but it just happened not to be on Daf Yomi, but what can I tell you? It works. Daf Yomi for all kinds of reasons, for psychological reasons, it doesn't work, the other stuff. But so you have all these books that are sort of out of style today because they're sort of like modern, it's the same reason Art Scroll printed its Siddur. They said it right at the beginning, or they did their Chumash. There was a time people were happy with the Hertz Chumash and this. And today, we have a different generation. They want more. The RCA wrote that. Why did the Polo Siddur? They had to replace it. We need a Siddur with more oomph and more explanation. It's a different community. Okay. Anyways, all right. So, it's already 10:15, so we have to stop. So what's a tzaddik? A tzaddik is a tzaddik. The Chafetz Chaim is a tzaddik, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Rav Zalman, you have Rav Moshe Feinstein, right? That's there's a rather see when we think of Rav Soloveitchik, to finish this thought, really, we don't think of him as a tzaddik, right? No, or we don't, and that in other words, we think of the Chavetz Chaim as a tzaddik, right? There's certain images you have of people. That's they said that, I think, what do they say? Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, we think of him as a great Lamdan. He was a genius Lamdan, and he reframed how we do Talmud. He understood. That's the Reb said. Things change. We're in the 19th century now. Science is picking up, and Jews are falling by the wayside. Judaism is archaic, old-fashioned, can't deal with modern. Science is new and exciting, and that's what the Reb said. The Reb always talked. My grandfather saved Torah. Without my grandfather, nobody would study Talmud, because my grandfather wrote science, classification. It was a scientific approach. That was why who criticized him. What's his name? Who was the chief? It was in Israel, then it was in Chicago. I forget his name now. The Ridvaz. The Ridvaz called Rav Chaim, he's a chemist. That was not a compliment. I mean, when they called Norman Lamas chemist, that was a compliment. He had a degree in chemistry. But when the Ridvaz called Rav Chaim Soloveitchik a chemist, that was not a compliment, because he had a scientific approach, classification, order, structure, because that's how people think today. So we're going to have to teach Talmud in that way. Brilliant, beautiful. And the Rav, he saved Torah because of that. But we that's what we think of Rav Chaim, brilliant intellectual. But they say Rav Chaim was such a tzaddik. You know the stories that with he took in all the orphans and the mamzerim into his house. When a single girl got pregnant, he would take her in and raise the baby. He was like a real tzaddik. When the woman came with how much he didn't allow people to daven on Yom Kippur, because there was some bundis, some bundis who for sure wasn't fasting on Kippur, was arrested by the Russian. We're not going to daven Yom Kippur. Everybody go home on Yom Kippur, get money. We're going to bribe the official, get money. He was all the sorts of people say his lamdus was so great. We don't focus on how much he was a tzaddik. And the same thing, the Chavetz Chaim was, well, there we do, but I forget who they say was such a tzaddik, we don't realize what a great lamdan he was, but they go together. We have different images. Okay, we'll have to pick up, though, really, what's the difference between a tzaddik and a chassid, pick up on that next week, but let's just do a quick review. So we just finished up the bracha V'Elam Al Shinim, full of very negativity, because at the time, as the Rambam said, the future of Judaism was in doubt. That's the way the Rambam seems to present it. They were very nervous. The temple had been destroyed, and now Jews were leaving the fold in droves and becoming other religions, and they were putting spies into the shuls, and a terrible thing. So we had no choice. We had to compose a very, very harsh bracha, which today it's different. We live in a slightly different world. Although there are unfortunately people we should say this bracha about, but maybe not Jews. And we discuss the real serious issue. There's a lot of thought, is what do you do when somebody's brought up in a particular way? How much credit or blame do they get with the Karaites or the Christians or Jews, are brought up, or the Arabs? You're brought up in a particular way. You can't really, there's certain things we expect natural morality, but certain things, that's the way you're brought up. So it's hard, and the halacha does take that into account. How much and where? It's a difficult issue, but something we have to think about. We spoke about the ambiguity of the Torah, who sold Yosef to Me'aldot HaIvriyot, right? The Torah does this on purpose so we can understand it on many levels. I forgot how we got into that, but whatever. And then we discussed, right, V'Elam Al Shinim was seen by the church as very negative, as an attack on Christianity, and therefore was censored, and that's why there's a Vav. V'Elam Al Shinim, it's at Ula Notzrim, somewhere it actually said the Notzrim, or the Meshumadim, and it says, I think, El Bogen, the Meshumadim, Al Tihi Tikva, right, and all the different ideas. Zaidi might even be Amalek, and that's what we said. Amalek, does that still exist? Or yes or no? Right? We know the nations aren't the nation, but is Amalek biological or conceptual? I think we all understand there's a conceptual idea to Amalek. Amalek can exist in a non-biological form. And then we just started the bracha of Al Hatzadikim, the Rambam's definition of a tzaddik, not too hard. We can all be tzaddikim. That's a beautiful thing. We can all be Rishaim too, but and God, and we have no way to count, because certain mitzvot can be worth 10 averot and vice versa, and they can change, as we said, over historical time. In certain historical time periods, things become more important and less important due to the society we live in, and Torah leaders have to be very appropriate. The tragedy of much of American Jewry is when people came after the Holocaust, great Torah scholars, and they went into teaching. They really, they had lost the best years of their life, so to speak, and they couldn't relate to American kids. I'm sure some of us had people like that, and it's a tragedy. People left you, not their fault, but you have to have an American mindset. Rav Soloveitchik had to learn how to play baseball. If you're going to talk to today, maybe they play less baseball. No, but if you want to be a successful, you have to know what's going on. You have to know what's going on in the world, and that means what interests the kids. Whatever they're. So it's very important rabbis be attuned to the times and to apply Torah that makes sense to people and it's going to inspire people. And and that's what made Jonathan Sachs a great rabbi. We all know. I don't have to start naming names. We all know people who can relate and great rabbis who can speak in the language. The Dibrat Torah kil shom bnei adam. We were using that the Torah may repeat itself. You don't have to worry about everything. But the Dibrat Torah kil shom bnei adam is also an imperative to us that we must speak Torah in the language that is understood by people. When Moshe Rabbeinu translated the Torah to 70 languages, it doesn't just mean into Greek and Arabic and Latin and whatever and Spanish. It means the language that speaks to people. 70 different languages. You have to different people. Okay, let's just take any quick questions here. Boker Tov. Were there kinds of prayers into time of Shabbat? I don't know, but we just start, I have to start plugging more. We have the podcast of Jewish Ideas. It's really one of the best. I'm not saying Torah Motion runs it, but it's really phenomenal. It's really, I think it's unique in the Jewish world. J.J. Kimchi, we interview fascinating people and such a wide range. You won't find the range we have. So we do it every week or two. We do a new episode. So we just started. The first one, I think only the first one was it's a 5-part series on Shabtai Tzvi. We did a 3-part series on Chabad recently, Zev. I don't know if you listened to that one. Most of them just interviewing fascinating people, very interesting people. But we're doing now a 5-part series on Shabtai Tzvi. I haven't even listened myself yet to the first part. So if you want to know about Shabtai Tzvi, probably they'll answer the question then. I imagine things were done in time Shabtai Tzvi. I don't know, but you have to realize most rabbis followed Shabtai Tzvi. I know that's like shh. But at the time when it happened, and even for maybe 100 years later, that's why Rav Yaakov Emden, who's born 30 years after Shabtai Tzvi dies, 35 years, is still fighting the Sabbateans left and right. So but during Shabtai Tzvi, many, I don't want to say the majority, I'm not necessarily saying that, but many great rabbis, great were followers, were believed in Shabtai Tzvi. They didn't know. Most of them, after he converted to Islam, it changed. So I don't know what prayers came from Shabtai Tzvi, but thank you. That's an interesting question. Yeah, the carrots were not brought to kill us. Absolutely, for sure. Morris, Rabbi Lau said one of his professors said Rabbi Lau is a Tinach Shenishpa, as he had no real choice whether or not to be a frum Jew. So did he mean it that because he's, I get it. Because I thought you say like a Haredi person would say to you, you're modern Orthodox, you're a Tinach Shenishpa. He's saying it, he's from, there is an element of truth to that. I do believe it. How much choice you want to give people, I don't know where to draw the line. There's absolutely, I tell my kids in chat all the time, had I been raised in a home that didn't keep kosher, I probably wouldn't keep kosher. I don't know, maybe, I don't blame them. Of course, I was brought up in a certain home, so that's who I am. We want to do that. Shema b'ni musar avicha. On the other hand, Morris, what do you want to say?
The professor was reacting to, that from people say that non-from people are excused from doing mitzvot because they were not shenishba. So he was reacting to that.
He's right. I agree with him 100%. I agree with him. Absolutely.
Your life. Yeah.
I agree. He's right. The trick is, so even though we were brought up, but we have to believe it on our own. It's got to be in our kishkas. Absolutely, it's right. That's what I'm saying. We're all when Tosfot says, "Don't blame the Christians; they're just following their parents." That's a mussar for us. Like if you're just following your parents. On the other hand, we want our kids to follow what we do. So it's not. But yes, he is right. What you think if the people brought up in Bnei Brak have been brought up in Herzliya, that'd be the same? No, of course not. Everybody's influenced. So, right, it's something before we judge anybody, let's keep that in mind, right? But yes, we're all Tinochot Shenishba in a certain way. By the way, today the non-religious are offended by that when you call them tinok shenish, but it's condescending. We have the right path. It's not your fault. They find that condescending. That approach doesn't work so much anymore. We have to have a different approach in dealing with non-religious Jews, whatever. They also, as Rav Lichtenstein said, they also have great values we can learn from. We have strong disagreements. Rav Lichtenstein has some amazingly positive things to say about, and many Reform rabbis, we have much to learn from them. They're ethical people, moral, they care about a lot of things that we stopped caring about. Why does Reform care on social? Many Orthodox Jews don't care on social justice. Well, that's in the Torah. That's more in the Torah than rituals. There's more social justice in the Torah. And somehow we let, that's the Reform. They can do that. That's a terrible thing. I mean, it's a wonderful thing they do it. It's a terrible thing that we're going to say, that's for the Reform. What do you mean that's for the Reform? That's Rav Elia Meir's Bloch's famous letter, and it tells Yeshiva, Rosh Yeshiva tells, there are 3 mitzvot religious Jews don't do anywhere. He's talking to Yeshiva boys. Don't do it. He said, learn Tanakh, live in Israel, and speak Hebrew, because that the non-religious Jews do that one. We wrote that many years ago. Yes, but I think the professor Benny Lau had a very important point. The Chama Leibowitz, right? We spoke about that. The Me'adot Ebriot, the new Torah, Koran Tanakh states that names Shifrim Pur are Semitic. Okay, I don't know, but that's what they say. Good. Shifra is on the list of slave names in Egyptian's archaeology. Cool. But nonetheless, it's very nice. This is My God by Herman Wick, right? It's another great example, right? Another example. I think Zev Elif, he just started his 10-part series on American history. I think one of his talks is on Herman Wouk, sort of forgotten, but I don't know how many people have read This Is My God of a certain generation. You can raise your hand. Even if we can't see you, you can still raise your hand. We're not taking those. But anyway, correct. I think that is another okay. Thank you, everybody. Any comments?
I thought it was Zekeliva and Veu, okay, Aviva Roman Mehu. That
Right.
encapsulates that idea.
What?
Am I doing it for me or because I?
Elohai Aviva Aromeno. Yes, you have to do it. I don't know. If you're totally have no choice in life, you're totally brought up in a authoritarian parent, and I don't know. Okay, hold on. What's Elaine saying? When we face Hashem at the end of our lives, does he also say it's not your fault? Yeah, he probably does. Yeah, to what degree? I mean, obviously, we don't know. Yes, I would hope God wouldn't hold us responsible if you never learned Torah. There is a Tinok Shenishba. It's a halakhic concept. That's a halakhic concept. If you were brought up in a home of idolatry and you don't know any better, that there is a halakhic concept. Just got applied today. We use it in a Balchu. We use it in a very different way. Obviously, what we don't expect God. How God judges, we don't know. That's what the Rambam wrote. We don't know what mitzvot is worth more, what mitzvot is worth less. Maybe they'll be judged in a totally different scale. Right? I don't. It's not for us to judge anybody. Maybe the Jew brought up, told non-religious, going to judge how much charity does he give, how nice is he, does he help the homeless? I don't know, but he's not going to be judged on his kashrut. He doesn't know about kashrut and everything. Why should he keep kosher? Why should somebody who's brought up not keeping kosher keep kosher? And you know what? If they're not, it's our fault. We haven't done a good enough job explaining why kashrut is important for ethical reasons. Remember the entire Torah. Hillel says, "What's the entire Torah? What's hateful to you, don't do unto others." That's the whole Torah, right? Or meaning that's why we keep Shabbos. The Rambam writes that tzedakah is the most important mitzvah asay. Remember, we did the Rambam. The entire Torah is given for peace by Hanukkah. The Rambam and Silcha Hanukkah. The entire Torah was given for peace. That's it. Everything in the Torah. It's an amazing Rambam. Amazing. So that means kashrut, mezuzah, Shabbos, mikvah, all to bring peace to the world. So if we're unable to articulate why keeping kosher makes the world a more peaceful place, we'll be judged. We're the failures. Don't blame them. So I mean, it's you have to work on it, right? So yes, so I think we face Hashem as Rav Zushis, and we'll end here. Right? Rav Zushis, was that his name? Says when he gets up to heaven, they're not going to ask him, "Why weren't you like?" Rav Moshe Feinstein, why weren't you like this? They're going to ask you, Zusya, why weren't you Zusya? They're not going to ask you why you weren't like this one. They're going to ask you, why weren't you? Why didn't you reach your potential? So that's don't worry. I don't know what. Don't agree. Where response? Where response for home behavior? Yeah, it's a good question. No, we can't totally blame our parents. That's for sure. But but parents have to blame themselves. That's what Rav Shimshon Hirsch writes. It's a little bit, your hair will stand on edge. Go read Hirsch now about Yaakov and Esav. It's Yitzchak and Rivka's fault, the way Esav turned out. Had they did not shown favoritism to their kids, had they realized, not just favoritism, even more, had they realized they're different, they sent them to the same school. They raised them as twins. They didn't realize they are fraternal twins, and each one needed a different education. That's what he writes. And had they realized, had they not tried to peg Esav into the Yaakov hole, had they let him play sports and go hunting as part of his fun thing, and then also what yeshiva, whatever, I know anachronistic, he could have turned out well. That's what he writes. It's Yitzchak and Rivka's fault. Wow. I mean, the Medrash says because of Yaakov having a favorite son, because of a stupid coat, we ended up in Egypt as slaves. Had Yaakov Avinu not shown favoritism to Yosef, we wouldn't have ended up in Egypt. That's what the Medrash said. So we always look to blame ourselves. But when we deal with others, no, that everybody, that's only for us to do to ourselves. Okay, hope that makes sense. All right, everybody, Shabbat Shalom. The weeks are getting longer, so we can, the days are getting longer, more sun. Let's hope to hear good news and peace. The whole world, the whole Torah is for peace. Let's hope that we can put peace in Israel and everywhere. And Shabbat Shalom. And was also favored. Right. Each one of the generation learned the mistakes of the parents. That's right. And Yaakov didn't learn from his parents. How could Yaakov not learn from the mistake of his parents and show favorites in Yosef? And Yosef didn't learn the lesson because he gave Binyamin 5 times as much he gave the brothers. Yeah, it's hard. People, it's very hard to learn to overcome your biases that you get as a child. Absolutely. Okay. Please invite a friend. We look forward to learning with you. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Be well. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Bye-bye. Yeah, Shabbos.
Thank you.
Thank you.